Let's get back to our top story of the morning. With fuel prices still close to $5 a gallon across the United States, President Biden will call on Congress to temporarily suspend the 18.4 cent a gallon federal gas tax. Biden also wants states to pause their own gas taxes. Joining us right now to talk about this is Jeff Currie. He's Goldman Sachs Global Head of Commodities Research. And Jeff, what do you think? Is this a good idea? What will it mean for gas prices longer term?
No, it's not the best idea. It's bullish energy prices because it's reducing the price to the consumer, and the law of demand says they're going to consume more if you take down the price. But I'm kind of surprised that the market is selling off as much of it is. But when you look at gasoline prices, distillate prices, and what's happening to the products, the cracks are at an all-time high this morning. And I think that distinction is important because when we look at energy prices altogether, crude has not been a good proxy for what energy is doing. Energy prices are up substantial. And I want to point out, year to date, commodities are up 47%. So while everything else in your portfolio is down, a balanced portfolio is down 18%, commodities are the place to hide. They're the best asset. Now, also, one other point I want to emphasize here, and I just want you to think about this. The only thing on your screen that is up year to date are carbon-based commodities, hydrocarbons, carbohydrates. And the only thing separating a hydrocarbon from a carbohydrate is oxygen. So just think about that.
Excellent point. Jeff, talk me through this, though. Why is WTI down by more than 5.5% today? That's a pretty significant move. I don't think it's related to the gas tax, but why is it? Is this concerns about a recession? Is this the rolling of a contract? What happened? Because this is a weird move. We have not seen down 5.5% in quite a while. We're talking about 103.34 a barrel.
Yep. I would chalk it up to two things. One is obviously recession fears hitting every single asset class out there. But also I think the other point too is let's look at what refining margins are doing today. They're going to all-time highs. So that spread between oil and everything else is now beginning to get to such large levels that it's disconnecting. It goes back to that point. Crude is not a good proxy for what the rest of the energy complex is doing. And so when we think about, I think, one, if it disconnects, which what it is, then it's driven by technicals. It becomes kind of like an internal transfer price. And the technicals are rather weak. You're sitting right now today on that 50-day moving average. And we just went from last week to one moving average to the next moving average, which I think is an indication it's not really being driven by fundamentals. It's being driven by other factors. And again, fundamentally, what's happening, the products are reflecting what's really going on.
And it feels, to Becky's point, Jeff, and it's Brian, like today's the first day of the new monthly futures contract. So I wonder if there's just kind of some technical positioning because the contract expired last night and maybe is rolling over. We've seen moves like this before on these kind of days. That said, now I'm going to kind of promo something for Worldwide Exchange we're going to do tomorrow. We've looked at data about Russian oil flows, and I'd like to know what Goldman thinks because we're going to do a segment tomorrow on Worldwide Exchange that Russian oil production and seaborne exports are at pre-war levels. In other words, the sanctions may have cut off Russian oil from the United States and parts of Europe, but India is buying all it can and more. What kind of data are you seeing on Russia?
Yeah, we agree with that point. But I think the key difference is the products are down, and you just had a refinery today blow up it was bombed in Russia, which is an indication
it got blown up.
That the products that the products are that the product prices is where the shortage is. It goes back to what's going on. Just as you point out that, hey, we're having a big down day in WTI, let me remind you, we just went to the all-time high cracks the market has ever seen. So it's really much more of a product story than it is an oil production story. By the way, the administration is very aware of this, which is why it's targeting the products as opposed to the crude. And you listen to OPEC has made the point that, hey, we can bring on the oil supply. This is an oil refining and product problem as opposed to being a crude oil problem.
Jeff, let me ask you, the refining, how much are we down in terms of our refining capacity in the United States, and why is that? What are the reasons?
The U.S. is down roughly about 1.2 million barrels per day. Globally, if you go back, about a month ago, we were down somewhere closer to 4 globally. Some of that's down for temporary maintenance that can be brought back on. And the reason why we're still bullish on crude oil, more of that, that's brought down for maintenance can come back online. But the U.S. was retired for many different reasons. Actually, one of the bigger reasons is around environmental policy. Companies, to be able to say, hey, I'm not involved in petroleum anymore. I'm purely a chemical company or something like that, can shut a refinery and then boost their multiple by no longer being involved in, petroleum products. And that's one of the reasons that we have seen these closures. It goes back to my point. What's the only thing on your screen that is up year to date? It is carbon-based things, which tells you the real scarcity is in carbon-based items. And that's what's up, whether if it's carbohydrates like food or hydrocarbons like energy and hydrocarbons like refined products.
Chevron's CEO got in a back and forth, Michael Wirth, with the Biden administration, and he laid out some pretty thoughtful points just to say, look, at Chevron, we are increasing our production. We are increasing our refinery input, and gave some pretty significant numbers that showed that. We're also increasing capital expenditures, he said, by more than 50% to about $18 billion this year. That's what you would expect to see, that the industry will chase these higher prices. How long before things like that actually start to help out in terms of oil prices or gasoline prices?
This is a global problem, not a local problem. And one company like Chevron, they're a microcosm in the larger big cog. And yes, it's fabulous that they're making these big increases. But let's look at the European companies, BP, Shell. They struggle in the current environment given they have windfall profit taxes and a bunch of other types of regulatory and policy imposed on it, making it very difficult for them to do the same thing that Chevron's doing. So, I applaud Chevron. I think they're making great strides, as well as the U.S. companies. But this is, again, let's think about that. What makes commodities really different from any other asset class? They are truly global in nature. That's part of the reason why I'm sitting here in London, is that these are global markets. They're not local markets like equities and bonds.
So it's hurting to have things like a windfall profits tax in London, and maybe that should be a cautionary tale for U.S. regulators too?
Yes, it doesn't stimulate investment. It's the opposite. In fact, what they're doing here in Europe, they're hitting them with windfall profit tax and restricts their ability to make investments, but then taking those revenues from those profit taxes and then giving them as subsidies to the consumers. By the way, that's what Biden is doing with the tax cut. It's creating, essentially a subsidy to the consumer, which what are the consumers going to do? They're going to consume and buy more. And in the case in Europe, they don't have the ability to increase the production. And so when we think about, the price of gasoline, it's set globally around the world. And so the actions of another country can offset, positive actions in another one.
Jeff, thank you. It's always good to see you, and we appreciate your time today.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Also, a programming note for you. Don't miss David Faber's exclusive